Another bowl, bit of pyrography, and this one took a lot of work. Starting off here with a Beech blank. It's roughly about 250mm wide, which is about 8 inches. Using the faceplate I seem to use most of the time now, which just goes straight onto the chuck, just so much quicker and easier. First job as usual, face off the bottom. I then mark where I'm going to put the tenant or mortise. In this case I'm going for a mortise this time, and I'm going to be using my large chuck jaws. True off the outsides and do any basic shaping. You can already see here from every time the lathe stops that where there's cracks appearing in this piece. What I do with the cracks is I try and find the finest dust, fill all the cracks up, just rubbing all the dust in, and then just top it off with CA glue. Now the big problem I had here was that normally when I do CA glue to fill these cracks up, as I would usually have sealed the wood with something like sanding seal, because what happens, and as you'll see this all the way through now, is that the CA glue does stain the wood, and there's not really a great deal you can do about it because it's just gone right the way into the wood because the wood is so dry. With all the basic shaping on the outside done, I then turn out the mortise. Double check this with my jaws just to check that it's going to fit okay, because I don't want to go to the full extent of using the jaws for the depth, otherwise you lose how deep you can actually hollow out the bowl from inside. From there I will then sand this back using the bowl sander, and one of the main reasons for this is I want to see how much of this staining and the CA comes out with the sanding. So I do start off with a fairly low grit, something like about 80 grit. I also have to top up some of the cracks again where the dust and CA hadn't penetrated all the way through. For the rim I've decided to do like an inlay, and this is where I want to do the pyrography work on the bowl. I also got here a fair bit of tear out on the edges, and it took a fair bit of touching up with trying to use the skew as a scraper. I even had to use my little box scraper. Some more filling up with the cracks, and when it comes to sanding there was an awful lot of hand sanding on there as well, trying to get rid of that tear out. So the easiest way for this is just to take the whole chuck off. That way I know that when it goes back on the lathe it's going to be precisely where it was. I have printed out 5 strips here of some Celtic patterns. I managed to find a very basic pattern on the internet, and I then took that into Photoshop, pulled it apart, extended it to the length that I needed it to be, and then put it back together again. And as you see, I printed 5 strips out on one A4 sheet of paper. The plan is actually to use 3 of these round it. You should see here that the main problem I had was that when I stuck the paper to the bowl, because the bowl has a slight curve, it's going to be tight on one edge but it's going to be loose on the other edge. This did actually cause a few issues with tracing the image out. I'm only going to show the first set of pyrography here that I do, the first band, purely and simply because 1, it takes so long, and 2, I'm also working under a magnifying lamp, which, as you'll see on this second part of pyrography, the light really does cause an issue with the overexposure and everything, and it's just the same all the way around the piece. I wasn't overly impressed with the pattern when I'd gone over it once. I always use my shading bit because you can use the finer point of the tip on there. I actually went over the pattern probably about 3 times in all, and that 3rd time was really just to fill in all the shading before I got something I was happy with. Once that was all done, the whole thing back on the lathe, sanding sealer, Yorkshire Grit, Woodwax22 and microcrystalline wax. And I think by the time I'd actually finished with the microcrystalline wax, it was getting fairly late and I packed up for the day, so just left the piece there on the lathe, which is a really good thing, because if you leave the microcrystalline wax a while, it does set nicely, so that next time you go to it and touch it, you don't get fingerprints everywhere. Changed over the jaws to my large jaws, flipped the bowl round on the chuck, took off the base plate and started hollowing out. Hollowing out was nice and easy, just had to stop, check for measurements all the time, just so I didn't go too deep. Kept the walls to a reasonable thickness, I think they're about 10–15mm thick. I use the veneer calipers to check the depth of my bowl, and I find it quite easy enough to do this while the lathe is still spinning, because you've just got one little point where it's going to be touching the base of the bowl. Once I was happy with all the hollowing out, just tidied it up a bit with the scraper, and it did take quite a bit of sanding. There was a couple of odd little bits of tear out on either side, nothing big but just enough that was annoying, just that you had to just work to get rid of it. Just like with the outside of the bowl, once it's been sanded, sanding sealer, Yorkshire Grit, Woodwax22 and the microcrystalline wax again. Hello there, it's Paul here and welcome along everyone. Yes, another bowl, this time it's Beech. Because it was a light colour, I decided to go on the Pyrography. Now, this was a lot of work, and it wasn't, I mean, I already had the idea of what I wanted to do on here. I wanted to do some form of a Celtic pattern on a rim on the outside, and so after I turned the basic shape, I picked up on these cracks. That to me is, to be honest, is the only part that's really just ruined this. Is the problem was that I needed to fill it all with CA, and I really needed to do that before I did the Pyrography. Now normally what I'd do was be to give this a coat of sanding sealer before I put the CA on, but I didn't want to do that before I did the Pyrography. And you can see on the inside there, that's where the crack is as well on there. You can just about feel it. But because I put sand and sealer on first, before the CA, it doesn't all show up. But on the outside, I mean, the main one isn't so bad, but it's just these little 3 ones which I think has ruined it. For the Pyrography, as you see through the video, I printed off 5 strips of these. And I found a pattern on the internet which was a very, very shortened pattern to this. It had the ends on and probably 2 or 3 pieces in the middle, so just using Photoshop, separate it all to pieces and put in all the middle bits that I needed to fill out the length and put the end pieces on. And it's only 1 sheet of A4 paper, so that's why I printed 5. Even though I was only going to use 3, I thought it's better to have spare than not at all, and also it's nice to have a visual reference of one that you've actually not penciled all over. Now the problem I had with that was the bowl has got a bit of a curve on it, so when you try and put a flat piece of paper around there, along the top rim here, it was on nice and flat, but then there was a gap on the bottom, so even penciling it in was a lot of hard work as well. Like with a lot of my pyrography work, I went over this the first time and I really didn't think it was going to come out anything special at all. I wasn't enjoying it whatsoever. It really just didn't look very nice. And I think by the time I'd finished this, I'd actually gone over it about 3 times before I come up with what I'd got there, and with the shading and everything like that, I really do like it. Same as with all the recent projects, sanded down, sanding sealer, Yorkshire Grit, Woodwax22 and Microcrystaline Wax. And what I found with this was that with the microcrystalline wax, I more or less left it overnight each time because of the way I was working before I came out and touched it again, and by that time the wax had fully hardened off and you don't get no fingerprints, no smears or anything. It really has come up a lot nicer. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you on the next project video.